That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so we already went through and talked about our running back rankings of the week, and we are going to do the same thing here at wide receiver, where every single week we're going through and we're listing out our wide receiver rankings and tiers to help you with your start-sit decisions. But of course, do not hesitate to come out. Go to the comment section, ask any start-sit, ask any trade questions that you may have. You all see that I'm answering hundreds of comments literally every single day. I'm trying to get to as many of your questions as possible. So I'm also live streaming every single night, answering your questions directly from there. So just make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you want to come out to those live streams where we're streaming every night, all you have to do is hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out and that way you can participate, get your question asked. And just to give you all a little heads up, I mean, don't feel the need to go ask for a trade question directly, because we actually have our rest of season rankings posted over there on Patreon for anybody that's a member of the flock, for anybody that is supporting the channel. We are going to be updating those rest of season rankings every single week throughout the entire season. So please make sure you go to the description of the video. Make sure you join the flock, support the channel, have access to those rankings, and so much more. We're also doing bonus videos there, but I know y'all are probably tired of seeing all the videos by now. And that should be it. Let's go through and let's talk about these wide receiver rankings, and let's be a little bold here. I know that we are going to get some hate for this. I don't care. Our wide receiver one for the week, numero uno. It's not Tyreek Hill, who just put up like 200 yards against the Cleveland Browns. It's instead the wide receiver that just played in an offense that was a train wreck this past week. Let's go Davante Adams, our wide receiver one. My initial reaction whenever we were going through and making these rankings, I was like, okay, well, let's put Tyreek at one. And then you see that Davante Adams going up against the Detroit Lions. And this is a spot where we just know this is the definition of a get-right game for the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are going to come out. They are going to steamroll the Detroit Lions. I am not going to be surprised to see over 100 receiving yards, multiple touchdowns for Davante Adams. Don't be surprised to see 4 passing touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers himself. And still with Davante Adams this past week, while the overall offense crumbled, you still had him with a ridiculous target share where he was that bona fide stud on that team. Very little to worry about here with Davante Adams. We have multiple years under the belt, a very large sample size showing exactly how elite and reliable Davante Adams is. We're going to be going out and confidently putting him at our wide receiver one. I mean, he's going to be in the same tier with some of these other players, but if we had to choose someone for DFS, we had to go through and put our bet on someone. It's going to be Davante Adams. And at number 2, we will have Tyreek Hill. Very little to say. Playing with the best quarterback in the NFL, going up against the Baltimore Ravens team that I would imagine that the Kansas City Chiefs, they have to put up points against this defense. I mean, they are going to be having to aggressively throw the ball down the field. It's not going to be like a Denver Broncos type situation where they can just run it. No, you know Mahomes is going to be aggressive, taking those deep shots. Tyreek Hill coming off of a close to 200-yard performance. So it's ridiculous to have Hill at the number 2 spot this week. But going up against a slightly tougher defense than Davante Adams, we are going to have Adams at 1. And then at 3, we are going to DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins going up to Minnesota. We're going to keep it very brief with these guys at the very top, just because you're not going, oh, should I start Davante Adams? Should I start DeAndre Hopkins? Of course, you're starting all these players. But here with Hopkins, he is going up against the Minnesota Vikings. We just saw both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins perform well in this matchup. DeAndre Hopkins coming off a week where the overall offense for Arizona exploded. Hopkins had multiple touchdowns against Tennessee. I thought that was going to be the shootout of the week. I thought that was going to be the highest scoring game, given what we see with the potential in the Arizona Cardinals offense and what we thought we had with the Tennessee Titans as well. Maybe that's not necessarily there, but still DeAndre Hopkins, a safe call to be in this top tier. And now our last wide receiver, someone that did not live up to expectations this past week, in Stephon Diggs, but it was against a very tough defense where the overall offense struggled in Buffalo. Very similar to what we're looking at with Green Bay. I think you still have to have Stephon Diggs up in that elite tier, and that this is a wide receiver that you still had the extremely high target share for him. You still know that he is going to be getting targeted both deep downfield and closer to the line of scrimmage, so you get the best of both worlds with the easily catchable balls, and at the same time you also have those deep shots that are going to be a little more efficient if we can get some defensive attention away from Stephon Stephon Diggs in the form of Emmanuel Sanders. So yeah, we're going to have Diggs at number 4 going against Miami. Those are going to be our top 4 wide receivers in the top tier. Now let's bump it a tier down here where we are going to start off with someone that I know it's going to be seeming a little aggressive. I don't necessarily care. This is going to be a very big tier just to give everyone a heads up. We're starting it off with Keenan Allen at 5. This is something that we discussed last week when we were way above consensus on both Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, also Mike Evans, just for the week. Y'all know I don't like Mike Evans for the season, but we are starting as many players that we could in that Tampa Bay Dallas game because Dallas is the matchup that you are wanting to attack every single week this season. Because with Dallas, you get the best of both worlds in that their defense is not a good unit. And at the same time, their offense is good enough where they can go out and put up points at will. So that's going to create a lot of shootout scenarios where I'm expecting that the overall Los Angeles Chargers are going to be throwing the ball over and over and over again in a plus matchup. Have to be very excited about Keenan Allen. I know Mike Williams was that big play wide receiver last week. I think Keenan Allen is the more reliable wide receiver, however. And now at wide receiver 6, we're going to go over with DK Metcalf. Yes, he got outproduced by Tyler Lockett last week, but we know Tyler Lockett is that very volatile wide receiver where you are going to get those random 40-point weeks from Tyler Lockett. But at the same time, you're going to have those dud weeks mixed in. You're going to have the 12-week performance by Lockett that who knows when that could come. I think DK Metcalf, the bona fide wide receiver 1 here. We still had the elite passing efficiency by Russell Wilson. Looks like Shane Waldron is going to be trying to get this offense to more of a balanced state, but if the efficiency is elite for Russell Wilson, it's not necessarily going to matter that much. And they're going up against the Tennessee Titans. We just saw what the Tennessee Titans defense allowed for the Arizona Cardinals. So I think this is a spot where you can comfortably rely on what you're going to get with Seattle. DK Metcalf, an easy call in this tier. And now our next wide receiver, someone who failed last week, but has a tough matchup. So I don't want to assume that he's going to be that automatic bounce back candidate like we actually end up having with both Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs. Here with Calvin Ridley, we're going to have him as our wide receiver 7 going up against Tampa. I mean, my God, if the Atlanta Falcons offense struggled to move the ball down the field against the Philadelphia Eagles, it's going to be tough as hell to move the ball down the field against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We know that's an elite defensive unit. And here to go along with it, we're just viewing a player like Calvin Ridley as someone that, well, yes, you have to be a little worried about the overall offense. He's just going to be more so matchup proof with the target share that he does have. I think that you're viewing him and saying, well, we are on record. We've said it almost every single video since the end of time that Kyle Pitts, you should not have sky high expectations his rookie season based on the historical trends with what we have with those rookies coming into the NFL. I'll say Kyle Pitts had a decent amount of targets last week, so maybe we're looking a little wrong on that. But Calvin Ridley is just going to have a ridiculous target share. We have seen elite seasons before from Calvin Ridley in games where Julio Jones was gone. I really want to be making a bet on a Calvin Ridley bounce back. We're going to have him at wide receiver 7. And going over to wide receiver 8, let's go with Justin Jefferson against the Arizona Cardinals. Now here with Jefferson, I mean, it's just called start your studs. I know that's very boring once we're in the top 12 wide receivers here because it's very hard to say anything that goes against the grain because you want to go with the most talented players going up in a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. While the Cardinals defense looked good this past week, I'm not buying into that. I think the Cardinals defense are suspect to say the least. I think this is a unit that we still have to maintain our speculation that they're probably below average until we see multiple weeks of sustained success by the Arizona Cardinals. Completely fine with Jefferson. I know Adam Thielen comes out and just gets a ridiculous amount of touchdowns and overall fantasy points. But still, Jefferson, he's the wide receiver you want there. Now, in the same tier, I know this is becoming a massive tier. Trust me, I understand, but a lot of these guys are neck and neck. We're going to have, hate to say this, Amari Cooper at wide receiver 9. Now, here with Amari Cooper, this is someone y'all know we were consistently drafting in the 3rd round. I mean, we loved getting Amari Cooper in fantasy drafts, and that this is a wide receiver that's looking like he is going to be one of the top guys on one of the league's pass happiest teams in one of the league's offenses that will have the most passing volume. Don't love the matchup against the Chargers, but with Cooper, we have to acknowledge that Michael Gallup is out of the situation. So Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are both going to be seeing a target share slightly higher than what you should expect most weeks. We're actually going to be ranking CeeDee Lamb back-to-back with Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb will be at wide receiver 10. So we have them both as top 10 options for this upcoming week. In a matchup, while yes, it's tough, I mean, this is a passing offense that we want to be betting on in a situation that you should have larger roles for Amari and Lamb without Michael Gallup there. Both top 10 wide receivers for me this week. Now let's drop it down one more tier and let's go to A.J. Brown. Now here with A.J. Brown, I mean, wide receiver 11. Yes, he looked good last week. Yes, Julio Jones looked horrendous. I think this has to be a spot where maybe they kind of meet in the middle here. I'm actually kind of sad about this Tennessee Titans offense overall. Like, I'm more pessimistic about A.J. Brown now, despite A.J. Brown having the majority of the production in Tennessee than I was a week ago, because a big bet when you were drafting A.J. Brown is that Ryan Tannehill was going to maintain that efficiency and maintain that volume that he had without Arthur Smith. Now, I'm not throwing in the towel or anything. I mean, we have to see multiple weeks. We're not going to overreact to 1 week. But still, we have to be a little concerned about A.J. Brown against Seattle. I don't necessarily think this is a matchup we need to be running away from. I think it's a very neutral matchup, but it's going to be enough of a concern to drop him behind both CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, because I was drafting A.J. Brown over both of those Dallas wide receivers coming into the year. Now, someone y'all know we have on more, literally, teams than pretty much anybody. I play in over 200 fantasy leagues this year, and I think my most owned wide receiver, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, loved to see the blow-up week this past week. 14 targets. Now, yes, it was in a fantastic matchup. I mean, keep in mind, this was a matchup against the Dallas Cowboys defense that we already talked about, that we want to be attacking every chance that we get with Chris Godwin going up against Atlanta here. It's another great matchup. Hopefully, Atlanta can put up some points so we just don't get Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones running the ball over and over and over again. But still, with a player like Chris Godwin, this is a scenario where I think you can just make the pivot over and you can say, well, a lot of people want to talk about Antonio Brown. Let's talk about the guy that, imagine what the blow up would have been if we had no drop passes. Imagine what the blow up would have been without the fumble. Godwin could have put up an immense amount of fantasy points, like a laughable amount of fantasy points. I don't want to say he's flying under the radar by any means, but people need to understand that this is a top 12 option. We were drafting him over Terry McLaurin for a reason in fantasy drafts this year. Hopefully we get another week of double-digit targets, because if that's going to be the case, it'll be a good season for us. Now, our next wide receiver 13, will be Allen Robinson in a much better matchup than he had last week. I know a lot of people want to be a little worried about this Chicago Bears passing attack and Allen Robinson himself. He went up against Jalen Ramsey. What the hell do you want to expect? I mean, Allen Robinson is going to be our wide receiver 13 in a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, where you just had Adam Thielen go off. Don't think we have to worry about the Bengals defense in the slightest. So yeah, we are going to go Allen Robinson. And our last wide receiver in this tier will be Cooper Kupp. Yes, we're having Cooper Kupp behind Allen Robinson, despite Cooper Kupp's blow-up spot last week. I do think that Kupp's going to come down to earth just a little bit, and you will have an expanded workload for Robert Woods in this offense, however. So we are going to have Robert Woods as the next wide receiver in the following tier, but for now, we're going to have Cooper Kupp as that last guy in this one. He looks like he's maybe Matthew Stafford's number one target this year. It's way too early to say that based off of a 1 week sample, though, even though I know pretty much everybody was watching that game. And I lied to you. We're going to have Robert Woods later in this tier, but for now, let's instead go over and look at our wide receiver 15 in Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, yes, the blow-up week last week, yes, outscored Justin Jefferson. It doesn't matter. Don't try to fool yourself into thinking that Adam Thielen's the wide receiver 1 in this scenario. Adam Thielen's still going to be that wide receiver 2. And like we said, I mean, it kind of sucks. I was drafting Irv Smith a lot this offseason and fading Adam Thielen where we could. I was calling Adam Thielen a wide receiver that you couldn't draft. Then Irv Smith goes down. We go, okay, well, I guess now this red zone role that Adam Thielen has is a lot safer. The target share in terms of the usage in the red zone is more projectable, and I think it's not going to have as wide of a range of outcomes as we once thought. I think it's going to be a very safe spot to expect that Adam Thielen is the same wide receiver that we had in previous seasons. So it sucks that we weren't drafting him that much until the injury to Irv Smith. But yeah, he looked great last week. It was a great matchup against Cincinnati. Very little to say, multiple touchdowns. We're going to have Adam Thielen against Arizona. Now our next wide receiver, y'all have been waiting for him. And this is going to be me going out on a limb here. Someone that y'all know we were avoiding in every fantasy draft this season for great reason. I mean, we had the Los Angeles Rams players ranked ahead of him. We had CeeDee Lamb. We had Allen Robinson. We had Chris Godwin, all ranked ahead of him. Terry McLaurin. So with McLaurin, like we said, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick had only started on average 8 games over the past 5 years due to a multitude of injuries, due to everything in between with the Ryan Fitzmagic playing style. So now it looks like we're going to get to see exactly what Terry McLaurin looks like with Fitzmagic not in this game. Well, we're going to see this Thursday night. Now it's a good matchup against the New York Giants. Don't really have to be that worried about it based on what we had with Jerry Jeudy this past week. But Terry McLaurin, I still want to be concerned. Yes, Curtis Samuel's not going to be playing in this game, which should make you a little more excited about Terry McLaurin. Yes, we're pretty much having a very bold call to have him down there in this tier. But still, I'm not expecting what a lot of people were from Terry McLaurin going into the season. We didn't get it week 1. I don't think we're going to get it in week 2 with Taylor Heinicke. Now, our last wide receiver in this tier, we referenced him earlier, Robert Woods. Robert Woods, a very poor week, didn't even play a full amount of snaps. I mean, at the same time, had a very small number of targets, saved his week with a touchdown. I'm hoping this is going to be the bounce back spot for Robert Woods. Going up against Indianapolis, I'm assuming that this is going to be a game where it's a little more competitive on each side. And we saw that the Rams, they want to throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. And with Robert Woods, he's had such a high floor and ceiling over the past few seasons that I find it hard to believe that all of a sudden this will be a player that you're looking at and going, okay, well, Mason, yeah, Van Jefferson won the job. No, Van Jefferson did not win the job. Van Jefferson was a wide receiver in 2020 that came out, and he was literally older than Juju Smith-Schuster, and he was drafted last year. Van Jefferson, a horrendous prospect. Van Jefferson, someone that we don't need to be worried about at all for Robert Woods. So now let's drop it down one more tier, and let's go over to Tyler Lockett playing Tennessee. So Lockett does get the blow-up game this past week. I do want to focus in on the volume not being there. However, the volume wasn't really there for anybody just because Wilson won that game with efficiency rather than the raw amount of pass attempts. So it's easy for me to say, oh, look at Tyler Lockett. He only had 5 or 6 targets. Well, there were only so many passing attempts to go around in that game, so it's hard to hold that against Tyler Lockett. Obviously, he looked great, but the question centering around Tyler Lockett wasn't, oh, can he ever provide us wide receiver 1 value any given week? No, of course. We know Tyler Lockett can be the wide receiver 1 overall. The question is, can he sustain that over a long duration? We're about to find that out now in week 2. I'm going to have him as our wide receiver 18. And now let's go back to back with some Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receivers here. We're going to have wide receiver 19, Mike Evans, and wide receiver 20, Antonio Brown. So y'all know I was on the train coming into the season that we loved Godwin, loved Antonio Brown, and hated where Mike Evans was being drafted. And the reason why we hated where Mike Evans was being drafted is because that was a player that relied on touchdown volume rather than overall volume in the passing game with targets, yards, and receptions. And we know touchdown volume is going to be a lot harder to predict season to season. It's going to be a lot more volatile. So you don't want to be that surprised in week 1 that if Mike Evans doesn't score a touchdown, all of a sudden this is a player that could lose your matchup for you. Now, with all that being said, I don't want y'all to overreact that much because Mike Evans in week 1 was exactly who we knew Mike Evans was. Don't be just going through and changing your prior evaluations that drastically. We're going to keep Mike Evans in a similar range that we've already had him. We're going to keep him at wide receiver 19, Antonio Brown 1 slot behind him. And with Antonio Brown, I do want to point out, while yes, he looked fantastic, it's a 1-week role, and Antonio Brown did have a couple big plays that fueled the majority of that production. Still think Chris Godwin is a tier ahead of both of these guys. Clearly, there are reasons to be excited about this overall offense with how Tampa Bay looked last week against Dallas. Atlanta, a very nice matchup as well, and oh my gosh. This is going to look bad whenever you have just Antonio Brown going and leading this team in receiving yards. I don't care. We're going to have Antonio Brown ranked as the wide receiver 3, neck and neck with Mike Evans. And now our next wide receiver will be someone that also had a blow-up week just like Tyreek Hill last week. It's going to be Deebo Samuel. And I'm not going to lie to you. Deebo Samuel may go up. He may go down these rankings as we go through the week. I'm currently recording this on September 14th. This is a Tuesday. And here I'm sitting and saying, we don't necessarily know exactly what's going on with Brandon Ayuk. I stand by the fact that I believe Ayuk was utilized as a decoy in week 1 rather than a player that was fully healthy. We know Shanahan does not really want to fill us in on exactly what's going on ever. Shanahan's always the person to go out and misdirect us in one way and just completely do something else in a game. So Deebo Samuel, he's a better fit with Jimmy Garoppolo. Great that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be starting going up against Philadelphia. Philadelphia don't need to be too worried about this defense, even though, my God, they looked great against Atlanta. So maybe we're having to change our sentiment on that. But I still think this is going to be a great team. And as of now, it looks like Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 1. And now our next wide receiver, I hate to have him down this far, but we have no idea what happened last week. Julio Jones. Now with Julio Jones, it's so hard for me to speak on anything. I mean, we've actually had some questions in the live stream asking what I think is going on with Julio. And I'm going to be honest. That's the hardest question for me to possibly try to answer. I mean, whenever we get that Julio Jones question in the live stream, I'm like, thank you for putting me on the spot. Thank you for trying to get me to say something I don't know about, because to be honest, there are just some things in fantasy football. It's like a black box right now. Like, what's going on with Julio Jones? How did we have this Tennessee Titans offense just putting up nothing this past week? It sucks. I'll just say we have to sit and wait. We know Julio Jones was that elite talent when he was healthy last season. That's all we can say at this point. So I'm going to wait. We're still going to be starting Julio Jones in a lot of leagues, having him at wide receiver 22, but clearly it's not that exciting. And now our next options are going to be back-to-back rookie wide receivers with Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith. So both of these players are guys that can continue to climb up these rankings every week that they have that impressive performance. I will admit that I was completely wrong on both of these options this past week, where I came out and I said, you know what? We want to see week one. We want to at least see 1 week of production before we can put them in our starting lineups confidently. Well, we got that blow-up week from both wide receivers. Both wide receivers in their own right looked fantastic. Jamar Chase does have a matchup this week that I think he can be fine in. Devontae Smith, I mean, with the Eagles, it's going to be a little tougher with the Eagles going up against San Francisco. I don't really want to be betting in on Devontae Smith, which is why we're going to have him down here at wide receiver 24. I mean, however, with Jamar Chase going up against Chicago, I'm not worried about the Chicago defense in the slightest. We said that last week, and the Rams came out and just absolutely walked all over them. So yeah, not worried about Chicago, a little worried about the 49ers. But yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, we're live streaming every single night, so I can be answering your questions directly. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down in the comment section with any questions that you may have. I'm going to be trying to get to as many of those as I can. You'll see me answering hundreds of those down there. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Have a great day.